One of Kenya's biggest real estate companies has officially been put under liquidation. If you have ever bought property through Myspace Properties or you've done any business with the company in any way, today's story could directly affect you. My expectation is that by the end of this video, you'll be able to understand what liquidation really means. And during liquidation, I want you to understand who is going to be paid first by the liquidator, what happens to any customers who have already, let's say, paid any deposit for some of the properties that they were buying, and I want you to understand the key steps that all affected clients should be able to consider taking next. And I want you to understand the key steps that all affected clients need to take next. To understand how Myspace Properties ended up in liquidation, we first have to go back and understand how Myspace Properties came to be. Because Myspace Properties isn't just any other real estate company. For years, Myspace Companies has been one of the most recognized property brands in Kenya. And just to give you a history, Myspace Properties was founded in the year 2008 by entrepreneur Mwenda Thuranira, who you probably know. Now, this company started with land transactions, but the company quickly expanded beyond simply selling land. The company grew into a diversified real estate business, and they were able to offer different services like property development, property management, valuation services. They offered consultancy, and they even provided different people with avenues for various investment opportunities. What helped the company grow is that the founder had a story that resonated with many Kenyans. Mwenda Thuranira came from humble beginnings before venturing into real estate. But before he got into real estate, he had worked in customer service at Air France. Later, he pursued aviation studies in Orlando, and this was also followed by construction and real estate studies in Texas, where in Texas he got registered as a realtor. When he returned to Kenya, he combined all those experiences into a business that would grow at a very extraordinary pace. In just a decade, Myspace Properties had built a brand that many buyers had come to trust. Its different projects became increasingly visible, and this was especially so at the coast. The coast is where developments such as One Twiga Apartments, Nyali View Park, and Links Plaza helped establish Myspace companies as a serious player in the real estate market. The company also invested very heavily in marketing for it to be able to grow. This is a company that you would find it in every other property expo. It invested heavily in media and media appearances, and the CEO participated in numerous television interviews that put the company far ahead of its competitors. And because of this, MySpace became very familiar even to people who have never bought property from them. And as the business grew, so did its reputation as well. And in recognition of this performance, Myspace Properties was ranked among Kenya's top 100 medium-sized companies under the KPMG Top 100 survey. This recognition suggested that Myspace Properties was not just a company with strong growth, but it had a strong system, and that came with significant potential for the company. And if this wasn't enough, then came another big milestone. In the year 2019, Myspace Properties was admitted into the NSE Ibuka program. For those who don't know, the Ibuka program is an incubation program that is designed to prepare high growth companies for future listing on the stock exchange. Now, think about that for a moment. This is a company that was being prepared to be listed in the Nairobi Stock Exchange. But today, this company is under liquidation. That, you have to agree with me, it's a very extraordinary reversal. And this reversal raises a very important question. How does a company that appears to be thriving by every look of it, how does such a company all of a sudden end up in the High Court facing liquidation and eventually getting liquidated? And the answer lies in a legal dispute that has been unfolding quietly for several years now. And that simple dispute would eventually change everything. Now, let's get into this dispute that has brought us here. You see, by 2019, Myspace Properties looked unstoppable. It has a very big and growing brand. It has different projects that it could point to as part of its success. It had won numerous awards in real estate in Kenya, and it had even been admitted to the NSE Ibuka program. From outside looking in, it looked like this is a company that was way on its way up. But behind the scenes, a legal battle had been unfolding for years. According to court records, the battle would eventually become the foundation of this liquidation case. The dispute that has brought this liquidation arose on a project known as One Trigger Apartments. A construction contractor, let's refer to them as Team Construction Limited, claimed that it had carried out different works on this project, and after completion and handing over this project, there remained unpaid balances of around 47.7 million. That was the contractor's position. The company argued that the contract for this project was not between Team Construction and Myspace Properties. What they said is that this contract had been between Team Construction and One Trigger Limited, and One Trigger Limited was a separate legal entity. Remember, these were One Trigger Apartments, so they say the company is One Trigger Limited. The company, this case Myspace, also alleged that the dispute was being driven by business and political rivalry that was very intended to cripple its operations. Separately, as this case was in court, the matter went to arbitration. According to court documents, the two parties, Myspace Properties and Team Construction Limited, eventually reached a consensual arbitration award. On December 2014, that award was accepted and it was later adopted by the court on December 2015. At that point, the dispute and the award became a court-recognized debt. But I wish that was just the end of the story, but it was not. What follows since 2015 has been years and years of attempts by this company to recover the money. Team Construction told the court that despite all these repeated efforts, including trying to get auctioneers to execute the orders, different reminders to the company, this debt has remained unpaid. And this is where this allegation became particularly serious. In the petition that the company presented to court, the contractor allegedly that they've made different that attempts have been made to attach company assets, but these attempts are getting frustrated. The company claimed that vehicles that had been attached for auction later just disappeared. These vehicles were moved to unknown locations or they were transferred to third parties. The petition also argued that there were interference by rogue and compromised officers. The company also claimed that goons were being sent to frustrate their effort. Now, I want to be very careful here and say these were allegations made by the petitioner and these were made in court documents. I'm not stating that either of them has been proven as facts. Now, the contractor additionally stated that it had been unable to attach either the shares or any assets or to secure any payment despite all these multiple efforts to get the payment done. The company even alleged that a personal guarantee had been given by the director, yet the amount for that guarantee has remained unpaid. After years and years of these unsuccessful recovery attempts, Team Construction now had taken a different route. Instead of continuing like ordinary execution proceedings, it filed a petition seeking the liquidation of Myspace Properties because of the unpaid debt. Now, this was a major escalation because liquidation is not simply about trying to recover that debt that the company was owed. Liquidation is going ahead and asking the court to declare that a company has been unable to pay its debts as they fall due and that the company needs to be liquidated. When this matter came to court, the court examined whether the legal threshold for insolvency has been met. According to the judgment that was passed, the company had failed to settle the outstanding debt despite constant reminders and despite the existence of a statutory demand. Under Kenya's Insolvency Act, failure to comply with a valid statutory demand is one of the indicators that the court looks at, and that is one thing that the court may use when determining whether a company is unable to pay its debts. And ultimately, the High Court found that this threshold had been met. And on that basis, the court made a liquidation order. And this is the moment that everything changed. From that point forward, this became no longer just a dispute between a contractor on one end and a developer who is alleged hasn't paid. It becomes an insolvency matter. The court appointed Waithaka Nkaruya as the official liquidator, and this appointment was effective 15th of April 2026. And once a liquidator is appointed, control of the company actually changes hands. Decision making leaves the founder. It's not even made by the directors. The decision is not made even by the management, but decisions going forward are made by the court appointed liquidator. Which brings us to the questions that matters the most. What does liquidation of Myspace properties actually mean in practice? Because when many people hear the word liquidation, they just assume that the company closes its door overnight and stops operating. But that is not how it works. And understanding the next stage of this process is very critical. One, if you are owed money. Secondly, if you have an active transaction with Myspace Properties, or you paid a deposit to the company for certain services and those ones have not been fully been delivered. Here is what liquidation actually means. And this is the part that I really want you to pay attention to, because the word liquidation is often misunderstood. Many people hear the word liquidation and imagine that a company is shutting down its doors overnight. This means employees are walking out, offices are being locked, everything is coming to an immediate stop. But this is not what liquidation is. Liquidation is not a single event, but liquidation is a process. And for everyone who bought anything from Myspace Properties, or anyone who has invested in one of its projects, or for someone who is still owed any amount of money by the company, understanding this liquidation process is extremely important. So, allow me to walk you through it. Let's start with step number 1. And here, the court has already appointed a liquidator, which is the first part of the process. In this case, the court appointed Waithaka Nkaruya as the official liquidator of Myspace Properties. From the moment that he was appointed, control of the company changed hands. And as I've stated, the directors no longer control the company, but the liquidator does. The directors of that company, even if you check the CR12, are no longer in the control of the company affairs. Major decisions currently are no longer being made by the previous management of the company. Instead, the liquidator has now taken over as the key decision maker. And the liquidator's responsibility for Myspace Properties is not to sell the business. His primary brief is not to make sure Myspace Properties continues forever as a going concern. The liquidator's responsibility is to administer the company's affairs in a fair and lawful manner so that everyone who has an interest in the outcome is satisfied. This includes its creditors, employees of the company, different government agencies like KRA and SSF and HIF, no, SHIF, SHA, that one. And also making sure that liquidation is done in a way that doesn't impact negatively the shareholders. So that's the first step which has been done. Importantly is step number 2. The liquidator starts with one thing. They will identify everything that the company owns. They will also identify everything that the company owes to outsiders. I know this sounds very simple, but in reality, this is one of the most biggest undertaking that the liquidator will have to do. The liquidator will also need to identify all the company's assets. This could be land, building, motor vehicle, office equipment, could be cash that is held in different banks. And once the liquidator does all this, next they will need to also identify all the outstanding debts that the company owes to outsiders. Also, they will need to understand all the outstanding debts owed to the company. The liquidator will also take note of any investment or any assets that have value that the company has. And once they do this, they are going to compile a picture of the company's assets and liabilities. They will be able to understand who is owed money, how much is owed, which debt is secured, which debt is in dispute. All that is some of the first thing that the liquidator has to do. And it's only after that picture becomes very clear to the liquidator that now the liquidator can move the process forward and go to step number 3. In step number 3, creditors of the company are invited to submit their claims. And this is where most people make a costly mistake. Most people assume that the liquidator already knows whatever money the company owes outsiders. But this is not always the case. If you believe Myspace Properties owes you any money, you should not just wait. You need to be able to lodge your claim within 60 days as per the Gazette notice. And as you do that, make sure you are providing supporting documents. These supporting documents could include the sale agreement or the contract that you have, any receipts that you've done, maybe you have payment, any bank transfer records that you could have, and additional correspondence with the company that you may have. You need to provide this to the liquidator, because it's only after provision of these documents that you're able to establish your claim. The stronger the documentation that you are going to provide, the easier is it for the liquidator to assess your particular position. And if you fail to submit your claim within the set 60 days, you may harm your ability to participate in any eventual distribution of cash. And once all this documentation is collected, we move to step number 4. In step number 4, the liquidator realizes the company assets. Now, realizes is just, in simple terms, it's a legal way of saying converting all these assets that the company owes to cash. And for this to be done, some of the assets that the company has may be sold. If there are any outstanding debts that outsiders owe the company, it's the duty of the liquidator to collect those debts. And in this step, the objective is very straightforward. Sell assets, and create a pool of money from which different creditors can be paid. But this is where a common misconception arises. Many people believe that everyone is going to get paid and that everyone is going to get paid equally. But that is not how liquidation works. The law sets a particular order of priority for which these debts can be met, which brings us to step number 5. In this case of a liquidation of Myspace Properties, let's see who gets paid first. And this is probably the question that everybody wants answered. And the answer is not everyone stands in the same position when it comes to payment. Generally speaking, secured creditors are paid first from all the cash that is available, but they are paid from the assets over which they hold security. Think of it this way. If a bank has a registered charge over a property like a house, they will be paid first from the proceeds of sale of that house. If a bank has a charge over, let's say, a land, or anyone else has a charge, their rights are considered first before unsecured claims are done against all the cash proceeds. After the people who have secured interest are paid, then certain preferential creditors are paid next. This can include categories such as employees who are owed like salaries and wages, and people like KRA if they have certain tax claims that they have been lodged and are due. It's only after secured and preferential creditors have been dealt with that all unsecured creditors come into the picture. And this is where many buyers become very concerned. If you had paid a deposit to Myspace Properties to buy, let's say, a property, and you've never received a transfer of that property, your legal position will depend on the facts and the terms of your transaction with Myspace Properties. In many situations, most buyers with unpaid contractual claims may rank among unsecured creditors and at times with the secured creditors. And finally, if every creditor has been paid in full, which I have to say it's very uncommon in liquidations, if all those creditors are paid, then any remaining value belongs to the shareholders. But from my experience, that often means shareholders receive very little or nothing. Now, let's move to the difficult reality. And this is why liquidation is such a serious development. By the time a court orders liquidation, the company is already experiencing significant financial distress. But that does not automatically mean that every creditor will lose. And nor does it guarantee that everyone will be repaid. The final outcome of liquidation depends on the value of the company's assets on one hand and the nature and the number of claims on the other hand. And at most times, the legal priority of each creditor. And every liquidation that I've come across is usually very different. But one thing is always true of every liquidation. The earlier you understand your position, the better you are prepared to protect your interest. And this brings us to the next question. If you bought a property from Myspace Properties, what exactly should you do? If you bought property from Myspace Properties, what exactly should you do? And that depends on the stage your transaction had reached before the liquidation order was made by the court. And that is what we are going to look at next. What does all of this mean if you had any dealings with Myspace Properties? The answer to that question depends on one very important question. What stage had your transaction reached before the liquidation order was made? Because not every buyer has the same legal position. Let's go ahead and look at a few common situations. Here is scenario number one for people who had invested with Myspace Properties. Let's assume you went to Myspace Properties and you went ahead and paid a deposit for a property. But the property has not yet been transferred into your name. And this is probably the situation that is causing people the greatest concern. If your transaction had not been completed before the liquidation order was issued, your rights will generally be dealt with through the liquidation process. In many cases, buyers in this position have to pursue their claims as normal creditors, although the exact legal position will depend on the terms of the agreement that you may have had with the company and the specific facts of your transaction. Let's go ahead and look at scenario two for people who may have bought properties with Myspace Properties. Let's assume you completed the purchase of your property and the property has already been transferred to your name. Your situation is very, very different and favorable. If you hold a properly registered title, you are simply and generally not another creditor waiting to be paid. And your property may be safe because you are the registered owner of that property. But that does not necessarily mean that the liquidation has no effect on you. But it does mean that your position is fundamentally different from someone who just paid a deposit and never received a transfer of their property. Even so, if you bought a property from Myspace Properties, this would be a good time to conduct a fresh title search and confirm exactly what appears on the register. Check if there are any charges, if there are any restrictions, maybe if there are caveats, or if there are any other encumbrances on your property. Let's look at scenario number three. Let's assume that you're still waiting for Myspace Properties to fulfill part of the agreement that you guys have had. Maybe you bought a property, Myspace Properties was supposed to put up the infrastructure like roads, electricity, sewer, and these ones have not been completed. Or maybe perhaps they were to develop some common areas and these remain unfinished. Or perhaps there are other contractual obligations that were still outstanding by the time the Gazette notice came out. Now, these obligations fall within the liquidation process and should be dealt with by the liquidator, because the liquidator now controls the company's affairs. That depends on specific contracts, the available assets that are in the pool for distribution, and any other decision that the liquidator will make throughout the insolvency process. And most importantly, that is why every case needs to be assessed on its own facts, because every case is different. In whichever scenario applies to you, the same core steps hold. If, number one, you had bought any property with Myspace Properties, gather every document connected with your transaction, whether this is a sale agreement, payment receipts, bank transfer confirmation. If you have any email communication, put all those correspondence and all those communications together. And if you are owed any money, submit this within the next 60 days to the liquidator. Do not assume that someone from the company will contact you first. And do not assume that the company already knows that they owe you money. Take the initiative and lodge your claim. And if anything about your position is currently unclear, seek an advice from your advocate or lawyer as soon as possible. Whenever a major developer experiences financial difficulties, rumors usually start to spread quickly, as in this case, the case of Myspace developers. People usually rush to social media and they rush to WhatsApp group and fill all these different groups with speculation. Some announce that everyone has lost everything. Others go ahead and insist that nothing has changed. And neither extreme helps us in this case. Liquidation, it's a very, very structured legal process. And for this process before completion, the outcome of each person depends on their relationship with the company. Two buyers who purchased two different apartments in the same development may have completely different legal positions depending on where each of their transactions had reached. And that is why facts matter. So before you rush to social media, make sure you are able to verify the facts of each transaction. And not just facts. The documents that you have that are available matters. And you can use this to get the right legal advice. If you think you may be affected by the liquidation of Myspace Properties, do not panic. But do not ignore the situation altogether. Take your time to organize all the documents that you have. Once you organize your documents, understand your position. Third, monitor communications that are coming from the liquidator. And where necessary, obtain legal advice before making important decisions for yourself. And the earlier you understand where you stand, the more options you are likely to have as this process goes forward. When we look at all these cases for Myspace Properties, here is the broader lesson. And this applies whether you ever dealt with Myspace Properties or not. This story of Myspace Properties concerns lessons that every property buyer, every property investor, and every real estate professional must take and take it seriously. Because here is the truth. When you buy a property from a developer, you are not just buying land or an apartment. You are also placing your trust in the financial health of a company that is behind that project. Because you may have seen just a beautiful showroom, maybe a very impressive office, or very professionally done marketing material. Or maybe you relied on a word that this developer has sworn. Or maybe you relied in their number of years of success. But none of these things by themselves usually guarantee that a company is financially healthy. Also, none of them guarantee that your investment is protected. And that is why, when buying properties, whether land or building, due diligence should never stop at just looking at the property that you're buying itself. You should also ask questions around the seller, around the developer, And this could be questions like, for how long has the developer been in operation? What are some of their successful projects? What is the quality of completion for those completed projects? What are their current ongoing projects? Also, check if there are any cases that are currently in court. And additionally, check the documents that you've been provided. Who owns the land on which the property is built? And if someone else owns the land, what does this mean for you? Think of it this way. If the construction of an apartment has been financed through borrowing, how will your interest be protected? I know these are not easy questions, but they are uncomfortable questions, but these are questions you should be able to understand and ask. Because buying property is one of the biggest financial decisions you will ever make, and it deserves that level of diligence. What does this case of Myspace Properties mean for you as a real estate agent? The Myspace Properties carries a very important lesson for all real estate agents because as real estate agents, we often focus on helping clients choose the right kind of property for them. We are concerned, is this the right location? Is this property being priced correctly? Is the property being provided with a very good repayment plan? And all those things really matter. I'm not saying they don't. But increasingly, clients are also relying on us as real estate agents to help them identify the risk for every purchase that they are going to do. And when I talk about identifying this risk, it doesn't mean that we should go ahead and guarantee that a developer will never experience financial difficulties. No one can honestly make that promise. But it does mean encouraging buyers to ask better questions. It's encouraging them to make sure they are getting independent legal advice. It's also working with the buyers to conduct proper due diligence before they buy. And most importantly, to understand all that is entailed in the transaction before they commit their life savings into it. Because the more informed your client is, the better protected both you and the client are whenever you are making any of these decisions. The liquidation of Myspace Properties is more than the story of one company. This is a reminder that in real estate, due diligence is not something that is optional. It's part and parcel of the investment that you're going to make. If you currently have money invested in maybe an off-plan development and you don't have any title to show, or maybe you paid a deposit and you are unsure about your legal position, or if you simply want to understand the risk that you are facing before buying a property from any developer, take your time and get independent advice either from your agent or from your lawyer before making your next move. And get this advice because it's far easier to prevent a problem from occurring than to solve that problem after that problem has maybe reached the courts. If you found this video helpful, consider sharing it with someone who is buying a property, someone who is investing in real estate, or someone who is working in the industry. Because by providing this video, it could help them ask the right questions before they commit their money. And if you'd like us to analyze another court decision or explain a legal issue affecting property owners, or if you'd want us to break down an important real estate case in plain English, let us know in the comment section. We read every suggestion and taking this chance to thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.